The stadium lights turned on before the sun fully disappeared, throwing long shadows across the field. Laura Bennett paused at the gate, her breath catching for reasons she did not fully understand. Something about this night felt bigger than a football game, bigger than the noise already rising from the stands. She stepped inside. The smell of popcorn and grass mixed in the cool air. Parents rushed past her, laughing, calling names, holding foam fingers and blankets. Laura moved more slowly. Her eyes searched the field with quiet focus, ignoring the crowd, ignoring the announcements echoing from the speakers. Then she saw him. Ethan Bennett stood near the sideline, helmet under his arm, shoulders stiff with nerves. He looked taller in his uniform, older somehow. Not like the little boy who once tripped over his own shoes in the backyard. This Ethan carried himself differently. Like someone standing at the edge of a dream. Laura's chest tightened. She found a seat halfway up the bleachers, close enough to see his number clearly. She folded her hands together, pressing her thumbs into her palms. This was his first varsity game. The moment he had talked about for years. The moment she had prepared for in ways he would never know. The announcer's voice boomed across the stadium, listing names, positions, hopes wrapped in loud confidence. When Ethan's name was called, the crowd clapped politely. Laura clapped harder, faster, her heart racing ahead of the sound. She remembered the early mornings. Ethan at 10 years old, dragging his cleats through the kitchen, still half asleep. Laura packing lunches while reminding him to believe in himself. She remembered muddy laundry, scraped knees, late rides home after practice. She remembered pretending not to worry. The referee blew the whistle. The game started fast. Too fast. Players collided, the sound sharp and heavy. Laura leaned forward without realizing it. Every move Ethan made pulled her closer to the edge of her seat. When he ran, she held her breath. When he stopped, she exhaled like she had been underwater. Around her, people shouted advice no one could hear. Run. Block. Watch the pass. Laura said nothing. Her support lived in silence, in presence, in being there no matter what happened next. At halftime, she stood to stretch her legs. That was when the emptiness beside her hit hardest. There had been a time when someone else would have stood there too, sharing this moment, smiling with pride. That time was gone. Life had turned, quietly but firmly. She did not let the sadness stay long. This night belonged to Ethan. As the teams returned to the field, Laura noticed a man standing near the fence. He wore a simple jacket, hands in his pockets, watching the players with calm attention. He didn't shout or clap. He just observed. There was something steady about him. She looked away, pulling her focus back to the game. The third quarter grew intense. The other team pushed hard. Ethan was sent in for a key play. Laura's heart jumped into her throat. She whispered his name under her breath, not as a prayer, not exactly, but close. The play exploded into motion. Ethan ran. Dodged. Fell. Got back up. The crowd reacted in waves. Cheers. Groans. Applause. Laura barely heard them. Her eyes stayed locked on him, counting each second until the play ended. When it did, Ethan stood tall, chest rising fast, eyes scanning the field. He hadn't scored. But he had held his ground. Laura smiled. She realized then that success did not always look like victory on a scoreboard. Sometimes it looked like standing back up when no one noticed. As the game moved toward its final minutes, the tension grew sharp. The score was close. The stands vibrated with energy. Laura felt it all but remained calm on the outside. She had learned long ago that strength did not need noise. The final whistle blew. The home team won by a narrow margin. Players hugged. Coaches shouted. The band played too loud, too proud. Ethan jogged off the field, helmet off now, hair damp with sweat. He scanned the stands. Laura stood and waved. He saw her. His face broke into a smile that erased every tired thought she had carried into the stadium. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the years behind them. Not the worries ahead. Just that look. As the crowd began to thin, Laura gathered her coat and purse. She moved toward the exit, heart still beating fast. Near the gate, she nearly bumped into the same man she had noticed earlier. "Sorry," she said quickly. He smiled. "No problem. Big night." She nodded. "For my son." He followed her gaze toward the field. "Number 12? "Yes." He played well. The words were simple, but they landed deep. Laura felt a warmth she hadn't expected. She thanked him, and for a second, neither of them moved. "I'm Daniel," he said. "Laura." That was all. They went their separate ways, but as Laura walked to her car, she felt something shift. Not loudly. Not clearly. Just enough to notice. She looked back once at the glowing field. Some nights marked endings. Others marked beginnings. Laura did not yet know which one this was, but she felt certain it would matter. Football season moved fast after that first night. Fridays blurred into each other, marked by the same bright lights and colder air. Laura Bennett learned the routine quickly. She finished work early, picked up dinner on the way home, and drove straight to the stadium. Life narrowed itself to the space between kickoff and the final whistle. Ethan changed too. He walked with more confidence now, shoulders squared, voice steadier. He talked about plays at the dinner table, replaying moments in his head. Laura listened carefully, nodding, asking questions, never rushing him. She knew these talks mattered more than advice. Each game carried its own tension. Some nights ended in victory, others in quiet disappointment. Laura stayed the same through all of it. She clapped when it went well. She waited patiently when it did not. She reminded Ethan that effort mattered more than applause. Daniel Parker appeared often after that first meeting. He stood near the fence or the concession stand, sometimes speaking with coaches, sometimes watching alone. He never forced conversation. When Laura stood nearby, he greeted her with a calm smile. Their talks were short at first, built on small things, weather changes, team injuries, long seasons. Over time, those small talks grew. Daniel spoke about his past in careful pieces. He had played football years ago, enough to love it but not enough to chase it forever. An injury had ended that chapter early. He never sounded bitter. Just thoughtful. Laura shared less, but what she shared mattered. She spoke about raising Ethan mostly on her own, about learning to be strong without becoming hard. Daniel listened without interrupting. That alone felt rare. One Friday night, rain fell just before halftime. The crowd shifted under ponchos and umbrellas. Laura stayed seated, letting the cool drops land on her coat. Daniel offered to grab her coffee. She accepted without thinking. When he returned, he handed her the cup carefully, as if it were something fragile. Their fingers touched for a brief second. Laura pulled her hand back, surprised by the warmth that rushed through her. Daniel noticed but said nothing. Ethan played hard that night. Late in the third quarter, he broke through the line and ran farther than he ever had before. The crowd rose as one. Laura stood too, heart pounding, breath caught. He was tackled just short of the goal line, but it didn't matter. The team scored on the next play. Laura's eyes filled with tears she did not try to hide. Daniel noticed. He handed her a napkin without looking at her directly, giving her space and understanding at the same time. She smiled through the tears, grateful for the quiet kindness. After the game, Ethan ran to her, soaked and smiling. He talked fast, words spilling out with joy and disbelief. Laura hugged him tightly, feeling the strength in his arms, the growth she could no longer ignore. That night, she lay awake longer than usual. Not because of the game. Because she realized her heart was shifting in ways she had not planned. She had spent years keeping her world small and safe. Supporting Ethan had been enough. Or so she thought. The next weeks tested that belief. Ethan's coach began giving him more responsibility. More time on the field. More pressure. With it came self-doubt. One night, after a tough loss, Ethan sat at the kitchen table, silent, staring at his plate. Laura did not rush to fix it. She sat across from him and waited. "I messed up," he finally said. "You tried," she replied. He looked up. "What if trying isn't enough?" Laura paused. She chose her words carefully. "Trying opens doors. What you do after that decides where they lead." Ethan nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of it. At the next game, Daniel stood beside Laura for most of the night. They talked about fear, about expectations, about how young people carried more than they showed. Laura was surprised by how easy it felt to speak honestly with him. She did not feel judged. She felt seen. As the season moved forward, rumors began to float around the stands. Talk of camps. Scouts. Invitations. Laura heard them but stayed quiet. She did not want Ethan chasing voices that were not ready to catch him. Still, hope crept in. One evening, as the stadium emptied, Daniel walked Laura to her car. The air was cold, their breath visible between words. "You're doing a good job," he said. She laughed softly. "Some days it doesn't feel like it. Those are usually the days it matters most." She looked at him then, really looked. The kindness in his eyes was not loud. It did not demand anything. That made it powerful. "I'm glad I met you," she said, surprising herself. "Me too," he replied, equally sincere. They stood there a moment longer than necessary. As Laura drove home, she realized something important. Supporting her son did not mean closing every other door in her life. Love, she understood now, did not steal strength. It added to it. But just as that thought settled in her chest, Ethan would soon bring news that would test every bit of that strength she had built. Ethan came home one Thursday evening, slamming the front door behind him. Laura looked up from her book, sensing the storm before she saw it. He was holding a letter, the edges slightly crumpled, his hands trembling. "Mom, look at this," he said, voice tight, almost breathless. Laura put the book down and took the letter. The envelope had the emblem of a regional football camp she had heard about but never dared hope for. She read it quickly, then looked at Ethan, heart pounding. "They want you to come," she said softly. Ethan's eyes were wide. They actually want me. Mom, this could change everything." Laura swallowed, nodding. "It's an incredible opportunity, Ethan. You've worked for it. You deserve it." But her mind spun. Travel. Expenses. Time away from school. The way the schedule would stretch her already busy days. Supporting dreams was one thing. Carrying them was another. I can't do it all by myself," she admitted quietly. Ethan reached out and took her hand. "I know, Mom. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't real." The room was quiet for a moment. The weight of hope and worry hung heavy in the air. Laura realized this was one of those moments that demanded more than encouragement. It demanded courage, from her. She nodded again. "Then we'll figure it out. Together." That night, Laura stayed awake long after Ethan had gone to bed. She stared at the ceiling, thinking about the costs, the travel, the logistics, the fear of failing him. Supporting him wasn't just cheering from the stands anymore. This was a chance to shape his future. And she wanted to do it right. The next day, Daniel appeared at the stadium, leaning casually against the fence. He didn't smile or speak at first, just watched the team practice. Laura approached him, hesitant. "Hey," she said. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" "Of course," he replied, stepping aside. She told him about the letter, the camp, the worry. She explained the logistics and her fears. Daniel listened quietly, nodding. Then he said something simple. You don't have to do it alone. The words landed differently than she expected. They weren't advice. They weren't solutions. Just a reminder that support could come in more ways than one. You mean, you'll help? She asked cautiously. If you want me to, he said. I can help with rides, with planning, with anything you need. You've been carrying a lot alone. Laura felt a sudden wave of relief. She hadn't realized how heavy the burden had become until someone offered to share it. The following week moved fast. They organized trips, schedules, and forms. Laura found herself laughing more than she had in months, even as the stress of the upcoming camp loomed. Daniel stayed nearby, a steady presence, never intrusive, always understanding. Ethan noticed the change too. One evening, he said, "Mom, it's nice seeing you smile again." Laura looked at him, surprised. "I guess. I forgot what that felt like." He grinned. "Don't forget it now." The night before the trip, Laura and Daniel stood outside the stadium after a late practice. The lights were off, the field quiet, the world suspended. "You're nervous," Daniel said, reading her like a book. "I am," she admitted. "It's not just Ethan. It's me too. I keep thinking, what if I can't do enough?" "You already are doing enough," he said simply. "Supporting a dream doesn't mean you fix everything. It means you show up even when it's hard." Laura took a deep breath, letting the words sink in. She realized that her fear had been about failure, not just for Ethan but for herself. She wanted to be strong, perfect, everything at once. Daniel's calm reminded her that strength wasn't flawless, it was steady. The next morning, Ethan packed the car with excitement and nervous energy. Laura kept glancing at him, remembering the small boy who had once tripped over his cleats in the yard. Now he was older, taller, ready to chase a bigger dream. Daniel helped with the bags, offering advice and support where he could. His presence was quiet but reassuring, a second layer of stability Laura hadn't realized she needed. The drive to the camp was filled with conversation, laughter, and the occasional silence. Laura watched Ethan talk about plays, about teammates, about his hopes for the season ahead. Daniel smiled beside her, listening, adding comments when needed, but mostly just present. Laura felt a deep sense of gratitude. She realized support didn't have to be lonely. It didn't have to be all on her shoulders. Love, friendship, partnership, it all worked together. When they arrived at the camp, Ethan ran ahead, full of energy and excitement. Laura and Daniel walked behind, taking in the sights, tall fields, coaches shouting instructions, boys running drills with focus and determination. Laura's chest tightened again, not with worry this time, but with pride. She had prepared him for this, and now he was ready. And she was ready too, in her own way, to step back, to watch, and to continue supporting him however she could. Daniel stood beside her, quietly observing. "He's ready," he said. Laura nodded, smiling. "I think so too." The weekend passed in a blur of drills, challenges, and evaluations. Ethan pushed himself harder than ever. Laura cheered from the sidelines, her voice hoarse by the end of each day. Daniel was there too, helping when needed, offering calm advice to her and occasionally to Ethan. By the final day, the instructors gathered the boys for evaluations. Ethan approached Laura first, grinning but exhausted. "I did it," he said. Laura hugged him tight, feeling every bit of the stress, the worry, the preparation melt away in his embrace. Daniel stood nearby, smiling quietly, giving space but also sharing in the joy. Laura realized something important: this wasn't just about Ethan's dreams. It was about her learning to trust others, to share the burden of care, to let love in quietly and steadily. As they drove home, Ethan slept in the back seat, tired but happy. Laura and Daniel exchanged a glance. Neither said much, but both felt the quiet connection deepening. That weekend tested more than Ethan's abilities. It tested Laura's heart, her patience, and her capacity to accept help and companionship. She understood now that supporting a dream sometimes meant letting go, letting others step in, and trusting the journey. The next season would be bigger. The challenges would be harder. But Laura felt ready. Not because she had solved everything, but because she knew she wouldn't have to face it alone. And somewhere in that realization, she felt a quiet hope stirring, a hope that the future, for both her son and herself, could hold more than she had ever dared to imagine. The morning of the regional football camp arrived with clear skies and crisp air. Laura Bennett woke before sunrise, her chest tight with anticipation and nerves. She moved quietly through the house, careful not to wake Ethan. Today was the culmination of months of hard work, practice, and determination. The first day of camp wasn't just another game, it was a chance to see how far her son could go. She brewed coffee and stood at the window, watching the light spread across the quiet neighborhood. Daniel had promised to meet them at the camp, and for some reason, knowing he would be there gave her a strange comfort. It wasn't just about logistics or support, it was the feeling of someone understanding the weight she carried. Ethan came down, hair still messy from sleep, eyes bright and nervous. He had packed his gear carefully, triple-checking every strap, every shoe, every jersey. "Mom, I'm ready," he said, voice filled with excitement and a hint of fear. "You've got this," Laura said, smiling, trying to hide the flutter of worry in her stomach. They arrived at the camp early, the parking lot filling with cars and vans carrying boys from all over the region. The field stretched wide, green and perfect, dotted with coaches and trainers shouting instructions. The energy was electric, but Laura felt calm. She had prepared for this. She had supported him through practices, through wins, through losses. This was the next step. Daniel pulled up beside them in his car. He unloaded the bags, careful with Ethan's cleats and helmet. "Looks like everything's in order," he said quietly, smiling at Laura. She nodded, grateful for his steady presence. Ethan ran toward the field, calling back over his shoulder, "Wish me luck." Laura waved, heart swelling with pride. Daniel stood beside her. "He's ready," he said, almost as if reading her thoughts. "I hope so," she admitted softly. For the first few hours, the boys went through drills, sprints, and strategy exercises. Ethan moved with energy and focus, his confidence evident in every step. Laura watched from the sidelines, clapping and cheering, her voice hoarse by the end of the morning. Every tackle, every run, every pass carried the weight of months of preparation. Daniel stayed close, helping with minor adjustments, answering questions from parents, and quietly supporting Laura whenever she needed it. There was a warmth in his presence that made the long day easier to bear. They didn't speak much, but their shared understanding was enough. At lunch, Laura found a quiet spot to sit and catch her breath. Daniel joined her, carrying 2 sandwiches. "You're doing a great job," he said. "He's lucky to have you here." Laura smiled, feeling her cheeks warm. "I've learned a lot too," she admitted. "About patience, and letting go a little." Daniel nodded. Sometimes supporting someone else's dreams means standing back, not controlling. Letting them find their own path. They watched the boys return to the field. Ethan jogged past them, waving. Laura felt a flicker of something new, hope, yes, but also the realization that her role wasn't just about protecting him. It was about giving him space to grow, and letting herself grow too. The afternoon drills grew tougher. Coaches shouted, boys pushed harder, and fatigue began to show. Laura could see it in Ethan's posture, in the way he shook off minor mistakes, in the determination etched on his face. She clapped louder each time, trying to send strength through the air. Daniel noticed her tension. "Relax," he said softly. "He feels your support, but he doesn't need your worry too." Laura exhaled slowly. He was right. She had been holding on to her fear too tightly. Today wasn't about perfection, it was about presence, encouragement, and belief. By the final evaluation, Ethan was exhausted but exhilarated. Coaches gathered the boys and began giving feedback. Ethan came over to Laura first, helmet in hand, sweat on his brow, face glowing. "Mom. I did my best," he said, breathless but triumphant. Laura hugged him tightly, feeling every ounce of fear, hope, and pride she had carried release in that embrace. "I know you did," she said, voice shaking with emotion. "I'm so proud of you." Daniel stood nearby, smiling quietly, giving them space. Laura caught his eye and felt a connection, an unspoken understanding that she didn't have to navigate life alone anymore. He had been there for support, for kindness, for strength she didn't even know she needed. As they packed up to leave, Ethan chatted excitedly about the coach's comments, the drills he'd mastered, the friends he had made. Laura listened, laughing and encouraging, noticing how confident he had become in just a few days. The drive home was quiet in a comfortable way. Ethan dozed in the back seat, tired but happy. Laura looked over at Daniel, who was driving. Their hands brushed briefly as they passed a cup of coffee, and neither pulled away. There was a simplicity in the gesture, a promise of steady companionship without words. Laura reflected on the weekend. Supporting Ethan had been more than attending games or cheering from the stands. It had been about sacrifice, patience, and learning to accept help. It had been about letting go of fear and trusting the process, both for her son and herself. Daniel glanced at her, smiling softly. "You did amazing," he said. Laura smiled back, feeling something settle in her chest. It wasn't love at first sight. It wasn't fireworks. It was steady, reliable, warm, like being safe in a storm. She realized she had space in her life for more than just motherhood, that she could carry hope and trust alongside responsibility. That night, she tucked Ethan into bed, listening as he described every drill and play in detail, his energy still bright. She kissed his forehead and whispered, "I'll always be here." Ethan smiled, already half asleep. "I know, Mom. Always." Later, Laura sat by the window, watching the stars emerge. She thought of the past months, of every practice, every game, every anxious moment. She realized she had grown in ways she hadn't expected. She had learned that support was not just about being present, it was about giving love, space, and trust. Daniel's presence had shown her that she could accept help and companionship without guilt. And for the first time in years, she felt a quiet hope that life could hold both her son's dreams and her own happiness. The camp had ended, but the journey was just beginning. Ethan had a future full of possibilities, and Laura had discovered a new kind of strength within herself. She knew there would be challenges ahead, tough games, hard decisions, long nights, but she felt ready. Not because everything would be easy, but because she had learned to face life with courage, support, and an open heart. As they drove home under the fading sun, Laura felt a deep sense of peace. The road ahead was wide open, full of opportunities, victories, and lessons. And for the first time in a long while, she knew she would never walk it alone. She glanced at Daniel, who smiled back gently. And she knew, without words, that life had brought them together at just the right time. The stadium lights, the cheers, the victories, they had all led to this moment. A moment of pride, of love, of hope. A moment that marked not an ending, but a beginning. Laura whispered to herself, smiling softly, "We're ready."